Hey guys, if you're shopping for knives and gear, make sure you check out the description of the video you're watching right now for links to some great online retailers. There's also individual links for knives that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Middle Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Spyderco Siren, an interesting lockback design that was designed by Mr. Lance Clinton, who is a fisherman, and that is the idea behind this knife, is to essentially exemplify qualities that would be very beneficial to somebody who's going to use this knife around water. So I wanted to make sure and keep that in mind while I'm doing this review. This knife was sent to me by the good, the great, the Nick Shabazz. Thank you so much, Nick, for sending this knife to me. Nick has been nothing but helpful and supportive ever since I started my channel. It is no secret that my channel is very much inspired by Nick and his style that has worked out for me, and I've been watching his channel and enjoying it for long, since long before I started mine. So yeah, great. I don't know why if you're watching my content and you didn't know that Nick Shabazz existed, which is unlikely, then go check out his channel because he does excellent reviews. Thank you so much to my generous patrons for supporting me right now. If you'd like to get your hands on some cool stickers and some other benefits, there's of course a link down in the description. Your support would mean the world to me. And be sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. All right, let's go ahead and get a measurement on this guy. Overall length of the Spyderco Siren coming in at, 8.6 inches overall. Blade length is coming in at 3.5 inches, and your actual cutting edge is, the blade length is the blade length is almost 3.6 inches, and then your cutting edge is about 3.5, maybe 3.4. That's pretty good. Spyderco tends to do a lot more handle than blade, and even though that is kind of the case here, you still have a substantial amount of cutting edge, but it will still be illegal in some places because this is a large locking knife. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1. Rat 1 coming in, it's supposed to be the exact same length, but even in my light, it actually looks like the Siren is a little bit longer. So let's measure that one more time. Yeah, this is closer to 8.7, or even maybe you might be able to fudge 8.7. It's about 8.7 or so. So it is a little bit longer than the Rat 1. Sorry about that. Let's go ahead and put it up against the Spyderco PM2. I'm sure a lot of people will be interested to see this. Spyderco PM2 is coming in at 8.3 inches overall. Now I'm all thrown off. How about up against the bench grade? Oh my gosh, I did it again. Bench-made Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue. Ritter Hogue is coming in at 8 inches overall. Last but not least, the smallest knife that I usually carry, the Spyderco Para 3. Para 3 is coming in at 7.25 inches overall. How's the action on this guy? For a lockback, it's pretty good. Let me say this. So when you disengage it, that blade's going to fall. It is quite smooth for a knife that runs on phosphor bronze. The first thing I did when I disengaged this is I held it about right here and I disengaged it. Now, you can see what's going to happen here. I'm holding it sideways so it doesn't happen, but that blade is going to come down on my fingers. It's probably, most people are going to go, well, you're stupid. You're going to disengage this with one hand and let it drop. You need to make sure that your finger is all the way up here so that it contacts the part of the blade that is not sharp. That's very important. The first time I did that, I definitely did cut myself with it. In fact, you can see the cut in some of my previous reviews. But yeah, the action's very, very smooth. This is a knife that you can't really, you can do that with it, right? The access to the thumb hole is great, but your reverse flicks and these lockback designs are not like your compression locks, right? Where you can easily do the reverse. This isn't what I'd call a fidgety knife. In fact, the entire design is 100% geared towards the end user. This is not a fidgety knife. It's not really a knife that's going to cater to the enthusiast, right? Unless you're just a Spyderco enthusiast or collector. This is a straightforward tool. In fact, in a lot of ways, and a lot of people are going to get mad at me, it reminds me of the Cold Steel American Lawman. No pomp, no frill. It's straightforward. It's meant to lock hard. It's meant to be functional and not fidgety, not anything like that. And in a lot of ways, I appreciate that because we live in a knife world now where there's a huge emphasis on, the knife being fidgety and pretty and, and then it's almost like the function part of it is not necessarily an afterthought, but it comes second. So this was designed by somebody who's like, I want a straightforward tool that's going to work very well in a very specific setting. And in pretty much every way, he accomplished that. We're going to talk about that here. But yeah, the action's very smooth for a lockback, and that's always nice. Always nice to see, absolutely. Let's go ahead and talk about, let's go do the hardware check. Get that done so I don't forget about it. Get out my tools here. You can find these tools down in the description. They are not expensive, and they are very, very recommendable. In fact, speaking of Nick Shabazz, the reason I picked these up in the first place is because the first person to mention these tools, or this guy specifically, was Nick Shabazz a long time ago. So there you go. Some information there. Pivot is, that actually might be a T10. Let's try a T10 here real quick. I know you guys, a lot of people don't like sitting through this part, but this is beneficial for some people. Yeah, okay, so the pivot's a T10, and the hardware screws might actually be T8, which is something I'm going to go ahead and check. Spyderco does some T6, they do some T8. I've come to find. Yeah, T8, that's awesome. I'm happy with that. I don't like T6, complain about it a lot because the bits tend to be smaller and they can strip out easily, and on top of that, Spyderco is not necessarily known for having super durable screws. I have definitely stripped Spyderco screws before, so I'm happy that the bit size and the head size is bigger. And also, it's got pretty minimal hardware. There's just, in fact, it's just 2 screws, and then some Chicago ends on the other side, and then you've got two parts to the pivot. So that's great. This should be very easy to disassemble. You, of course, have to mess with that back lock and make sure that the spring tension's in the right place if you're going to reassemble it. But for the most part, disassembly is going to be pretty easy. Let's go ahead and do carry profile up against the Spyderco Para 3. You can see it is actually thinner. Well, is it? I think it's marginally thinner than the Para 3. By the way, I didn't mention this. This knife is made in the United States. Spyderco makes different, some of their knives are made all over the place. This is Golden, Colorado, USA Earth, or USA. But they've got Taiwan, they've got China, they've got Japan. This is one of the US models, and actually there's a lot of qualities here that are indicative of that immediately, just picking it up. But anyways, length and height up against 2 knives that have awkward carry profiles that nobody ever complains about, the PM2 and Para 3, which is even more appropriate because this is a Spyderco knife. Overall length, it is definitely longer than both. But in terms of height, it's actually a little bit shorter because it doesn't have that big bump right there. There's enough of a cutout down here that they can set it a little lower and still make it accessible. So that's nice. The fact that it is, no, it's definitely not thicker than either of them makes it, for a knife of this size, it's welcome, right? On the inside here, the whole idea with this knife being as it's designed to be used in and around water is that they've done everything that they possibly could, or the designer did everything he possibly could to make sure that it was as stain resistant as possible. And one of the things that he did, you can pick up my flashlight down in the description as well. It's listed next to my tools. They made sure that the inside of this was G10 and there wasn't any excess steel where it didn't need to be outside of the lockback, right? So that gives you the benefit of extra stain resistant qualities because this is a synthetic, it's non-metallic material, G10, so you're not going to have to worry about corrosion, and also just expansion and contraction that you might see in like wood, for example, or other materials is just not going to be there. So anyways, weight on this guy comes in at 3.53 ounces, which is right on that ounce and inch line. For a lot of people that use that measurement, you're going to be happy with that. I always consider profile with it. Fortunately, the profile on this thing is really good for being a larger knife. So the only reason that some of you might not carry this is because it's just a large knife in terms of overall length, right? Or perhaps if you consider anything heavier than the Para 3, lightweight or mini bug out to be heavy, then maybe you won't like this either. For the vast majority of people, especially people who are used to carrying larger knives or knives of this size, this is not going to be a problem. If you're going to plan on EDCing this knife, there's one thing that's going to bother you is the ridiculously grippy texture. This is very aggressive, but a lot of times with EDC knives, when I see that texturing, like that's something that kind of bothers me on the American Lawman, since we talked about it earlier. The American Lawman is meant more as like a versatile knife that's going to be fairly good in a lot of different environments, but it uses a less stainless steel, S35VN, which is stainless in and of itself, but nowhere near as stainless as LC200N, which is what we're going to talk about that here in a sec. But anyways, the excess texturing on that is meant to make sure that you've got grip in a work setting, which is definitely what it was designed to do. This knife has excess grip that is similar. So if you're going to EDC this, it's definitely going to shred your pants. But, you know, thinking of where this knife was specifically designed to be used, which is in a wet environment, that's very welcome. I have definitely dropped knives off of the edge of a boat before. In fact, more than once. It sucks. I'm not saying that this is drop proof, but I mean, any excess texturing in that setting is very welcome. I'll take the phrase on the jeans that I'm going to be wearing in a dirty environment anyway and probably don't care about, just for the benefit of some excess texturing to make sure, or to help me not drop the knife. So I'm appreciative of that. Okay, we did weight, we did profile, we did the hardware check, we did all that action. Okay, let's move on here. This is a very simple construction, very simple scales. We've got chamfering all the way around. No issues there. I kind of like the blue, you know, it's sort of a G10 liner underneath it. This would be very boring without that. And I don't know, it kind of fits with the whole water theme, right? Easy access to the thumb hole. Ergonomics on this thing are great. They are simple. There's not, you know, any place that's specifically trying to confine you, right? But you got a little bit of extra so you can move around. You can kind of choke up on this, but it's not a choil, so be aware of where your finger is. It might slip up on that blade. But I'm trying to think, I'm not a fisherman. I'm not somebody who's always out on the water, but I go to the lake periodically. We used to go 2 to 3 times a year. Now it's like once every 2 years or something like that. And I don't fish a lot, but it's trying to imagine myself in that scenario. This is really good for that. You know, this is a knife that's going to get dirty. It's going to get used. It's going to be something that you use and reach for in a moment of convenience and take no extra time to appreciate any of the aesthetic qualities. You're just going to pull it out of your pocket and use it. And all of the ergonomic lines are beneficial for that, you know? So yeah, the handle shape and all that, it's great. And in fact, you know, even though this area right here on this lockback is a little bit sharp, it's going to catch your fingernails a little bit. I couldn't imagine anybody in that situation is going to be like, oh, I can't do my fishing stuff because my fingernails are being peeled off. You know, it's you know, whatever. it's in the right spot. It's easy to engage and disengage. I don't have a problem with that. The blade is about as perfect as it can be in a setting like that. I appreciate flat ground blades in lots of different EDC settings, right? But I think it's great for this. It is a little bit sharp up on the spine, but again, that's not really that big of a deal. LC200N, I think the story behind that, or at least what I've been saying, is that it used to be Chronometer 30 Evo, and then Spyderco really wanted to get their hands on it because it is an absolutely stain-proof, as far as I know, steel that is in every way an upgrade to their previous H1 steel on their saltwater series, right? Or their salt series. LC200N, according to the knife community, has edge retention that's very similar to S30V. And in some cases, you know, if the heat treat's exactly right, it's actually a little bit better than that. I honestly don't know about the toughness qualities of it, but it holds an edge really, really well and is extremely stain proof. So that means, yeah, better than M390, right? The edge retention is not the end-all, be-all quality, and I bring that up a lot, and LC200N really drives that point home. There are situations for some people where stain resistance is going to trump everything. Anybody who works around water, especially salt water, I mean, like, you know, a steel can have all the edge retention in the world, but it doesn't mean anything if the thing just corrodes and turns into a piece of dried beef jerky, right? So yeah, the stain-resistant qualities are very welcome in this style of knife. And the fact that it holds an edge as good as S30V, or at least by some reports, that's excellent. This is a steel that we will probably see a lot more of in this knife world, and it's going to become preferable for a lot of people. I mean, not having to worry about, you know, how stainless the blade is just makes this, it would make me want to use and carry a knife like this so much more often for so many different things, right? You can choose it, you know, without having to worry about that, you know? So that's great. We didn't talk about the blade stock thickness, did we? Did we talk about blade stock thickness? Let's talk about, let's measure that here real quick. I don't think that I did it. Blade stock thickness on the on this guy's coming in at 125 thousandths. That's fine. It's not thick at all. Comes down to a nice fairly thin cutting edge. I mean, the geometry of this blade is just going to make it very, very slicey in general. I think it's going to be perfect for a lot of things that have to do with the outdoors in general and fishing stuff, right? Which I'm going to say and leave generic because I'm not a professional when it comes to fishing. But yeah, this seems like a tool that'd be great for that. The inside of the hole is a little bit sharp, but, you know, whatever. There's a lot of stuff that you're going to be handling, you know, if you're going to bring this to the appropriate setting, that's going to be a lot rougher on your fingers than the opening hole or the spine of the blade or the spine of the, you know, lock. So whatever. Definitely a tip that's going to accentuate for puncture tasks, about the same, you know, kind of the same tip thickness out there as the PM2. Very similar, almost exactly the same, maybe slightly more robust. You don't want to be sticking this thing into anything and prying with it, right? This is a cutter and a slicer for sure. They did that well. There's no hint of a sharpening choil down here, so that's going to get weird looking over time. But for the most part, you're going to be okay. Yeah, LC200N is great there. I got no issues with the blade whatsoever. The handle does look quite large next to the blade, but just, I mean, this is all purpose built. It's all function, right? So maybe you could have had a little bit more, right? I don't know. I just don't have a problem with the blade. Texture pattern, I'll give you a close-up look at that. Very aggressive. This uses the wire clip, which I think is totally welcome. The wire clip is very minimalist and very utility-oriented. It's just made to go in and out of your pocket conveniently. The way that it mounts is great. I'm coming to appreciate it more and more, even though it just looks like a paper clip or a black paper clip in this case. This is an ambidextrous lock. So lefties, you can flip it over to the left-handed side. Carry it tip up only, which in my opinion is the only way to carry a knife, but your opinion may differ from mine. So that's great. I got no issues with the clip whatsoever. It doesn't carry absolutely deep, but there's not a lot sticking up out of your pocket, so that's fine. Absolutely. It's got a backspacer back here, which contrasts nicely with the blue liners. Looks pretty good. The other side of the knife is very similar to the front, except that it's got, no, in fact, it's identical. There's no difference to either side, so that's nice. This thing does lock out solid, absolutely, and you know, no blade play or anything like that. The knife came to me, it's a little bit off. I wonder if it's just moving a little bit because of the phosphor bronze washes. That is sometimes the case. You see there, I pushed it over and it just kind of settled near center. I imagine I could adjust that pivot and make it perfectly centered. I've got a video on that, of how you can adjust the body screws and the pivot and make everything perfectly centered. That's fine. Sometimes Spyderco knives come off centered. I wish they all came perfectly centered, but when we're working with phosphor bronze, it's not always the case. I'm 99% certain I could center this blade if I wanted to, and Nick has been manipulating this knife and using it, so perhaps it just needs a little bit of a tighten on the pivot. No big deal. So, in terms of an EDC knife, like somebody just is this good for just like EDC? There are lots of other Spyderco knives and lots of other knives in general I think will make a better EDC knife than this. For people who are looking for a knife that's excellent around water or when you're, you know, going fishing, yeah, 100%. This is probably the very first knife that I'm going to recommend. But there's, you know, very different. Whoever's asking me the question, right, will determine my answer on that. So this is definitely not a knife that I can recommend to everybody. And furthermore, this is pretty expensive, even considering it's using LC200N, which is a very new and very preferable, very interesting super steel. They want $168 for this. At least that's what I checked on a few retailers that I normally check, and $168. Spyderco has been slowly increasing the prices on everything. I don't know if this knife has kept its exact price since it debuted. But this feels more like a $130, $140 knife to me. You know, right around where the Spyderco PM2 was for a long time. Pair of 3, right? Even the Spyderco Shaman used to be $155. Now they want over $200 for it. It feels a little bit pricey, right? I mean, the general interest in this is it's one of very few knives right now that's using LC200N. And this is a very simple construction. This is a lock design that's not new or special in any way. It's functional. It works well with this knife. It doesn't need to have a fidgety lock. Scale construction overall, I mean, yeah, it's very typical. I mean, like, you can get knives like this that are made in the USA with this type of construction for much less, like the Cold Steel American Lawman, which is very similar. But I'm sorry, that's not American made. I always mess that up because it says American Lawman. But there are other US knives that have similar construction that cost less money than this, and this seems to have some unnecessary extra price in it. I'd be a lot more comfortable with this knife at $130 to $140, but For people who are looking for something that's going to excel and last when you are fishing or working around water, there's probably not a better knife out there. I would say this is definitely worth the extra money. There are other, I mean, some people get by just fine with the less expensive Salt series, right? But if you're looking for a USA made knife that's great around water, that's made well, that's going to accentuate, it's going to be, make a lot of the tasks that you would use it for, much easier. Yeah, this is like one of the best options out there. At least that's what I assume based on, the information that I have and what I know about fishing and being around water, which isn't very much. But for everybody else, there's a lot of knives that would be better for you. But that's fine because this knife wasn't designed to cater to everybody. It was designed to cater towards people who are going to be around water. So this knife is going to go in my Spyderco knives playlist. It's not going to go in my most recommended knives playlist, but it's not because it's not a good knife. It's just made specifically for certain people. I think that's really all that needs to be said here. This is cool. I liked this a lot more than I, thought that I would. It's interesting. Thanks again, Nick, for sending this guy along. Guys, that's going to be pretty much it for today's overview and review. Be sure to follow me on Instagram, and this knife will be listed down below where you can check this out, as well as all available Spyderco knives right now, so you can shop Spyderco knives if you want to. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that metal complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.